as well. Staying damp across Wales and the southwest, but brighter skies for the southeast and humid here. 30 Celsius for London, 25 for eastern Scotland, and for all areas, a breeze coming in from the southwest, quite gusty around the northwest of Scotland, where there'll be showers continuing into Tuesday evening. A lot of cloud continues to affect the UK into the early hours of Wednesday, and as a result, it's a notably warm night in places. Central and eastern England, East Wales, temperatures not dipping below 19 Celsius, so perhaps an uncomfortable night for sleeping. And a cloudy start to the day for many. There'll be some outbreaks of rain pushing into South Wales and southwest England, heavy in places, and it looks like there'll be showers as well for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But it turns brighter by the afternoon, and Thursday and Friday sees a mixture of bright spells and showers, those showers mostly affecting the north, turning a bit cooler as well.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hey, welcome along. Liberty shrivels every day in the United Kingdom. The public health bureaucracy, backed by the disinformation enforcers in social media, don't think you should have the right to make up your own mind about vaccines for the COVID. The European Court of Human Rights doesn't think a sovereign nation such as the UK has the right to determine who sets foot in these islands. And the bozo thugs of the Hampshire Constabulary don't think an Englishman has the right to tweet without being handcuffed, arrested and dragged away. An Englishman's home may be his castle, but it is certainly not his Twitter feed. What's that song they like to do at the Albert Hall round about this time of year? That's your hate crime right there. Britons never, never, never shall be slaves. The Hampshire police didn't get the memo. And being totally crap at investigating crime, they'd rather investigate your Twitter feed. Frankly, it's a lot easier. As for Britannia rule the waves, ha! Britannia no longer rules the beaches of southern England no longer rules the end of the pier. Never mind anything in the actual water. And the European Court of Human Rights says there's not a thing you can do about that. We'll get into all of it tonight. After 12 years of so-called Conservative government, we have another record-breaking month of, quote, asylum seekers on the South Shore. And next month's exciting new Prime Minister hasn't a word to say about it, but Kelvin Mackenzie has, and he's here with us. That Hampshire police business, Lawrence Fox was there to witness it, and he'll bring us up to speed on what went down there. And Ava Vlaardingerbroek is here. No, not down the line from whichever sophisticated world capital she happens to be flitting through. Normally, Ava's leading a glamorous life, jet-setting hither and yon, trying to stay one step ahead of the vaccine mandates with 6 fake passports sewn into the lining of her coat. But tonight she's in studio. We smuggled her in on a dinghy from France, disguised as a 37-year-old Somali jihadist, so she'd get the express check-in treatment. She actually is a 37-year-old Somali jihadist, just posing as a Dutch lady. Plus, the most vital part of the show, all the more important because we live in the constant swirl of a blizzard of lies. Your comments and questions, give it your best. You can be as personally vicious about my Poundland hairpiece as you wish, but do send your comments along via email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at gbnews. But first, as ever, the latest headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you. Good evening to you. The top story tonight on GB News. The Conservative leadership hustings have begun at Exeter this evening, opening with an on-screen montage of the party's highs and lows, including Boris Johnson's election victory in 2019. And in a letter aimed at attracting support from Conservative members, candidate Liz Truss has insisted now is the time to be bold. The Foreign Secretary also making further policy announcements in her campaign to be Prime Minister, vowing to tackle post-Brexit restrictions to improve British farming.
What I want to do is cut the red tape that farmers face, get rid of things like solar panels in our fields and instead be using it for productive agriculture, and also make sure that farmers do have the seasonal workers that they need to help get the crops out of the ground. I know the struggles farmers face, and I want to tell them that I'm on their side. We know how important food security is, and I'll help deliver that.
Meanwhile, the other leadership candidate, Rishi Sunak, has set out his vision for the economy, saying his plan is one of the most far-reaching initiatives to cut income tax people have seen. The former Chancellor has committed to taking 4 pence off income tax within 7 years, if he becomes Prime Minister, of course, cutting the basic rate from 20 pence in the pound to 16.
Now that bills are going to be higher than we thought, it's right that we go further. And as Prime Minister, what I want to do is cut VAT on energy bills to provide a little bit of extra help for people over the autumn and winter. But today I've been setting out my radical vision for where I want to take the economy after we get inflation under control. I want to cut income tax by 20%. That's one of the most far-reaching cuts to income tax that we've seen.
Well, in news away from politics, Archie Battersbee's mother says she feels her son has been let down by Britain's healthcare system. It's after the Court of Appeal ruled that the Royal London Hospital must switch off the 12-year-old's life support treatment at midday tomorrow. Archie has been in a coma since April. Court of Appeal judges have refused to allow an appeal against their decision, but Archie's parents say they'll now appeal to the Supreme Court directly. As you've been hearing, GB News has learnt the number of small boats arriving in the UK has hit a record high, with the largest number of people crossing on a single day ever. More than 600 migrants are being processed as a result in Kent today, after the authorities seized around a dozen small boats over a 10-hour period. More than 3,500 people crossed the Channel in July, in the highest monthly total this year. And as if you didn't know, thousands of fans have been gathering in central London today to see the Lionesses win and hold aloft their trophy after winning the Euro 2022 trophy last night. Celebrations in the centre of London and indeed across the country today as the women's football team celebrated their historic 2-1 win against Germany last night. It's England's first major football championship win since the 1966 World Cup. A record crowd of 87,000 watching the girls at Wembley and 17.5 million of us tuning in to watch them on TV at home. That's it. You're up to date on GB News, on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. Where now it's time for Mark Steyn.
To reprise my old line, in Britain, everything is policed except crime. Dixon of Dock Green and other old-school telly-coppers used to advise young scallywags that crime doesn't pay. That's no longer true. If you like to break into your neighbour's home, steal his car, or even rape his womenfolk, it pays very handsomely. There is statistically near a 100% chance of your getting away with it. Only 1.3% of reported crimes, burglary, sexual assault, the lot, even lead to a summons, a charge, never mind a conviction. And that 1.3% figure is actually inflated by the police service's underreporting of crimes. But for example, in a certain corner of Hampshire, there have recently been 83 burglaries. Do you know how many of them remain unsolved, boys and girls? That's right, all 83 of them. What do the useless plods in that particular corner of Hampshire do in lieu of solving crime? Well, when you do bugger all of any use, it frees up enormous resources for harassing the citizen for his opinions. Thus, no fewer than 5 officers were dispatched by Hampshire Constabulary to arrest one citizen, Darren Brady, a law-abiding citizen, a veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq who has served Queen and country in some of the nastiest conflicts of the modern era. And what did the coppers get him for? Burglary? Rape? GBH? No. Pay close attention to the words of this disgraceful policeman.
Why has it come to this? Why am I in cuffs? Because there's something he shared, then I shared.
Because someone has been caused, obviously, anxiety based upon your social media post. That's why you've been arrested.
That's why you've been arrested. Someone has been caused anxiety based on your social media post. That is why you're being arrested. In no free society is that a crime. There is no real equivalent to what we see these policemen doing day after day in, say, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all of which were born from the English policing tradition. True, policing everywhere has degenerated in these grisly times, but only in the UK have the constabulary so enthusiastically embraced their reinvention as the thought police. Guess what they decided? After cuffing Mr. Brady and carting him off, why, you will never guess. Oh, they've decided not to press any charges. Well, I never. There are still people who defend the failed, shameful British constabulary by saying, oh, well, that just goes to show if you've done nothing wrong, all you have to do is let the process play out. No. To reprise another old line of mine, the process is the punishment. You send 5 thug coppers round to put a fellow in handcuffs, and you thereby tell 1,000 fainter hearts, don't link to Lawrence Fox, don't retweet the vaccine victim special on GB News, don't put up an excerpt from Ava Vladimir-Brok's latest interview, because they're going to come round to put you in handcuffs, and who knows how it might escalate from there. Do you really want to be truncheoned into the hospital for, quote, resisting arrest? It's precisely because there's no crime that they could have charged him with that the Hampshire police abuse is so intolerable, and the goon who ordered it ought to be known and has to be called to account. The Chief Constable of Hampshire Police is Olivia Pinkney. Here she is. We've asked her to come on the show. She joins our list of deplorable Chief Constables, along with Pippa Mills at West Mercia and that fella at Greater Manchester Police. And we'd like to know from her. Who in the chain of command ordered this 5-man raid? The Hampshire Constabulary has no business sending 5 officers to cuff a whippersnapper impertinent enough to laugh at the LGBT QWERTY flag. 20 years ago, my chum John O'Sullivan, who appears often on this show, observed that the British police had become the paramilitary wing of The Guardian. That's very true. They're the paramilitary wing of The Guardian and of Twitter and of Full Fact. And they've sent us a Hampshire police. They didn't make the chief constable available for interview, but they have sent us one of those. They claim to have been investigating an alleged offence under Section 127 of the 2003 Communications Act, and it said that they were acting in good faith after being deployed to investigate the report of an offensive image being shared online. Now, this is what they don't get. The so-called offensive image is a rearrangement of the rainbow flag made to look like a swastika. In a free society, you're allowed to laugh at the rainbow flag. You don't have to identify which of the various component parts. They've made it more complicated. It used to just be about sexual identity. Then they decided to put race and a whole bunch of... So now it's a big happy rainbow flag of happy out gays and happy devout Muslims who regard homosexuality as an abomination. But on the flag, they're all happy. And if you think that's absurd, you're allowed to laugh at it in free societies, because the alternative, the Hampshire police world of going around and arresting people for laughing at the rainbow flag, is worse. Lawrence Fox is a distinguished actor and the founder of the Reclaim Party, and you're basically to blame for this image of the new rainbow flag, which is frankly getting a little crowded, to put it mildly.
The migraine flag, isn't it? It's dreadful. Yeah, it started with a meme.
Yeah.
It's their own fault, really, for creating the progressive pride flag, which, when you put 4 of them in a certain way, is a swastika. And I often walk back from work or to work down Regent Street during the holy month of Pride, and it just looked like a Nuremberg rally all the way down. And I thought, oh look, it does. It slightly reminds me of Nazi Germany, when hectoring authoritarianism. You must bow down and pay homage to the holy flag of pride, and let's see what happens. And Twitter, and therefore the police, straight away afterwards, prove your point for you. You have to worship this flag.
It's disturbing, though, isn't it? Because it is a kind of politicised police force now. The police in Pride Month, the police actually are no good at solving crime, but I think a lot of their constables look very cute when they're bumping and grinding and doing the samba with the more fetching transgenders in the Pride Parade. That appears to be something that the British policeman is just about capable of. But when they're actually doing, they do all their cars up in the rainbow flag for Pride Month. So they're tootling around in rainbow flagged cars, arresting people who don't subscribe to the rainbow flag ideology. That does give it the air of someone making the mistake of laughing at the Iron Guard in tween wars Romania or something.
Well, I mean, they are, as you said, the paramilitary wing of The Guardian, or now the paramilitary wing of Stonewall. And, you know, the most important... It's a slightly different relationship, isn't it, in England, that we have with the police. It was all very friendly. You would say, my father said to me, you know, if you're in trouble when you're a kid, go and find a policeman. Now I say to my children, if you're in trouble on the street, go and find a lady or go into a shop. Avoid the police. They are complete disciples of this woke religion, and they're no different than the emerging Stasi, Gestapo, or the Cheka, as Miss Justice Knowles said in the Miller versus College of Policing. And they don't care, and they won't change. So we thought we'd surprise them and hold them to account.
Are they embarrassed when they're doing this in front of your cameras, or do they basically think they have right and justice on their side?
They were like automatons. But what I couldn't work out is why they wouldn't arrest me, seeing as I was the criminal. But what they did was they went to a man who admittedly had a long service record and you know, served our country with great courage. But it really panicked him. He was very stressed and upset when he contacted us. So I thought, OK, you want to come and mess and intimidate and harass and actually shake down was essentially what they wanted to do to the guy. They wanted to charge him 60 quid to re-educate himself.
Well, yeah, this is a fascinating point, Lawrence, because it is very much like a shakedown. They go there, they're all standing around him, and they're saying to him, we're going to prosecute you unless you agree to pay £60 and attend re-education class so that your incorrect views can be trained out of you and you won't have this problem again.
Well, this is why when we did turn up, we provided them with dispute resolution forms from the Bad Law Project. And we were only going to charge them £100 if they signed them and give them free sandwiches to come to London, and we'd explain what the law is and how they enforce it. But for some reason, they refused to sign those or come on our course.
And you say they're like automatons in that because I have a sort of sentimental view, and I think back to village constables of decades ago, and I can't imagine them going along with anything like this. But these guys just do it unthinkingly?
I think they were unthinking. I think the female police officer in particular they were panicked, which is what we didn't want to panic them. We wanted to give them a dose of their own medicine. You don't go people in this country should not fear having their doors knocked on for sharing a meme. That's not how we operate. So we thought we'd give them a little dose of their own medicine. But as one of the officers turned around, I saw she was wearing a pride flag badge on her uniform. Right. And that is not what we do. Back in the day, there was that argument about whether the thin blue line should be on the uniform to celebrate, and lots of coppers would say, no, it's not, it's the thin end of the wedge, and they were so right. I don't want a politicised police force. Every single one of our foundational national institutions has been totally captured by this horribly divisive ideology, and in the absence of anyone else doing it, we're going to root it out of every single one, and this is just the beginning.
Well, when Sir Robert Peel invented English policing 200 years ago, he was very clear. France had a very politicised police force in military red, and one of the reasons he chose blue was because it was important, as he saw it, well, he put it, the police are the public and the public are the police. After watching that video footage, nobody could possibly think that's true anymore.
No, and it's much worse than people expect. You know, you find it everywhere. My youngest son is being taught about white privilege, diversity, equity and inclusion and gender ideology in school as part of a PSHE education system. They are Stonewall young champions in schools. They're turning these kids into little comrades, and if we don't stop it, what we'll have is these automatons who will do what they are told and serve a political ideology. And as you say, police should police without fear or favour. I've got no problem with people turning up to police being at pride marches or anything like that, but just turn up in your uniform and march in solidarity with. You don't find them at lockdown protests dancing with the lockdowners, do you?
Well, no. The trouble is, you know, there is a certain faction, particularly on the right, that is all about law and order. At the moment, we don't have any order. We've got rampant crime of every kind throughout the UK, and we don't have any law, because we basically have these pseudo laws in which you tweet your opinion, you Facebook your opinion, and you get and the 5 policemen who would never come round to your house. I mean, that's really the answer here. If you call 999 and say someone's just broken into my house, they'll say, yeah, leave your name on the 24/7 answering machine in Rockhall and we'll get back to you in 3 years. If you were to say to them, someone's just burgled my house, and by the way, I've just tweeted something, that they'd be round in minutes for that.
It would.
Yeah.
It's insane. unbelievably insane. And also, I would laugh if it wasn't so unbelievably sinister. But I don't, you know, one doesn't trust the police. And a huge admiration for Mr. Brady for getting in touch with us. And this is how we do it. You know, in the absence, we've got the Uni Party over there in Westminster doing the same thing. So in the absence of that, we're going to test the legal system to the very limits with what's going on in our institutions, because they wouldn't get through in the ballot box, these ideologies.
No, the more you see the present British police, it just needs root and branch. I was going to say reform, but in fact it requires dismantling, with most of the current chief constables and deputy chief constables utterly unemployable in any new police. You know, they did it in Northern Ireland. The Royal Ulster Constabulary had the highest rate of fatalities of any police force on earth, and a terrible, tough job, and they decided, oh, we've got to put you out of business and create a new police force. These guys don't have a tough job because they're not doing it. They're not solving crimes or burglaries or rapes or whatever. They're just harassing the citizens. Why shouldn't they be put out of business and replaced with new forces?
Well, I mean, you would have thought as well, if 7 out of 10 coppers haven't made an arrest in a year, that they're obviously not doing their job very well, and you've got a soaring knife crime, and all Sadiq Khan can talk about is the sun monster and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I don't know why we've swapped inner virtue, you know, genuine virtue, for this crazy external virtue signalling, which actually is just masquerading behind some terrible authoritarian, totalitarian approach.
Yeah, don't say 7 out of 10 haven't made an arrest, because they'll be finding tweeters to arrest. There's a lot of tweeters out there. Thank you very much, Lawrence Fox. We're going to stay on this story because the pseudo-conservatives of what Lawrence calls the Uni Party across the river there have not really addressed the appalling state. The fellows running the Tory party have nothing to say about the wretched state of the British police. Your reaction up next, gbviews@gbnews.com. Plus, Ava Vlaardingerbroek's taking all this. Stick around, we're coming right back.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Oh, you're on.
GB News is the People's Channel, so let's hear what the people have to say. We wanted to know, should causing anxiety, causing alleged anxiety. This has not been established in a court of law. The anxiety is only alleged. Should causing someone alleged anxiety be a crime? And A. Garblek says the actions and non-actions of politicians and police cause me severe anxiety. Let's start with them. You should call that into your constabulary. Say that you've been given a bad case of anxiety at watching the police harass tweeters on the internet. You should, because it is entirely subjective. If anxiety is a crime, we can all be anxious. I can be made anxious by some twit in The Guardian, and the twit in The Guardian can be made anxious by me, and we can all waste police time till they're going to have to, whatever the government deficit is at the moment, they're going to have to multiply it by 10 to cover that. John says, he makes this point, how can they prove they have anxiety? Surely that's subjective. Yeah, there's no defense to it. If someone says you've made me anxious, you can't, how do you defend that in a court of law? You can't say, oh no, I haven't made you anxious. I've got some undercover video footage here of you doing the lambada in a London nightclub at 2 in the morning, so you can't have been that anxious. No, it's not a crime. Casper says any LGBTQ hate would be treated as life-threatening, and Joe says, no, it's not a crime, and a judge has already said it isn't. They lied. Yeah, they actually arrested the second guy they arrested, Harry Miller, who was arrested for obstructing a constable in the course of arresting someone else. He's already taken that to court. But that's the thing. The process is the punishment. Ladies and gentlemen, the purported leader of the free world.
Okay, you're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations. Talk about your fake news. Can we get an Ofcom investigation going on that? Right now, Joe Biden has the COVID. And if you're thinking, wait a minute, didn't Steyn do the Biden has the COVID story last week? This must be a repeat. Let's see if it's lesbian mud wrestling night at the Commonwealth Games on Channel 37. Well, yes, we did do the Joe Biden COVID story last week, but that was last week's Joe Biden dose of the COVID. This is this week's Joe Biden dose of the COVID. He had the COVID last week, and then it cleared up for 3 days, and now he's got it again. His doctor says this is a side effect of the treatment he was prescribed, Paxlovid. Sometimes it clears up the COVID, and then you get it all over again in what's known as rebound COVID. This is Joe Biden's doctor explaining for us rubes what rebound COVID is. There it is, rebound positivity. You tested positive for COVID. They shoot you full of the juice to make the COVID go away, and it does, but just for 72 hours, and then you get rebound positivity, as the White House doctor puts it. A rebound case, just like when they told us that vaccinated persons who nevertheless caught the COVID were so-called breakthrough cases, until it emerged that 90% of those hospitalized and dead were vaccinated. So they moved on from vaccinated and breakthrough to rebound. Who is it who makes this Paxlovid wonder drug? Really? Pfizer? Well, there's a surprise. Boy, I wish I had Pfizer's business model. First, they sell you the vaccine that prevents you getting the disease. Then when you get the disease, they sell you the drug that cures you of it. And then when you're cured of it, you get it all over again 3 days later. The Guardian reported last week that this show is under investigation by Ofcom because we think there's more to the COVID vaccines than the rah-rah propaganda that the media pom-pom girls have been peddling for a year and a half. I don't know why we should get investigated simply for seeking to broaden the discourse on this very important subject. Anyway, we invited the writer of that Guardian story, Jim Waterson, to come on this show to discuss his piece, but he gave us the bum's rush. I wanted him on not because he got everything to do with me and this show completely wrong, including saying that we broadcast it from Canada. That's a famous Canadian building just behind me. That's not the reason I wanted him on. I wanted him on because the snivelling little twerp sorely traduced the many guests of ours who've been injured by the vaccines or widowed or orphaned by the vaccines and now have insult added to injury by media grandees from The Guardian. Mr. Waterson said, I interviewed people who, quote, blame the death of family members on COVID jabs. No, sir. It's not a matter of your elite Guardian opinion versus their lowly, unworthy opinion. They have doctors' diagnoses, they have death certificates, they have coroner's verdicts, they have notification from Her Majesty's government that they will receive six-figure compensation because they're injured or bereaved by these lousy vaccines. So it's not a matter of their worthless opinion versus your Guardian-credentialed, full-fact-approved opinion. It's about reality versus the groupthink media's propaganda, which is now untenable. By way of example, this morning,
well, what's really excellent is, and it's a statistic that I think should be shouted from the rooftops, is that after 12 days from the first vaccination of the AstraZeneca vaccine, you are 100% effective against hospitalization and death. So, you know, those are the statistics we need to be hearing. And yes,
Why haven't we heard that before?
Because it's not in the least bit true. The vaccine is 100% effective against hospitalization and death. As we reported last week, the latest government data show that of the 5,678 COVID deaths in April and May, 5,276 were vaccinated. The vaccinated account for 93% of the dead. More to the point, given that these vaccines were brand new and they had no long-term data, that lady was in no position even to assert such a thing. And yet she did, and no one at Ofcom is investigating this morning, even though people are dead and crippled because of that stultifying, reductive propaganda day in, day out, shriveling the permissible conversation. This morning, sticking with the propaganda, another vaccine victim was supposed to be on this morning, and then they had a change of heart. Look at this tweet. It's scary. I never really believed in media censorship or anything like that until this. We were told by This Morning that they wouldn't be able to cover John's story for fear it would put people off the vaccine. That's an interesting way of putting it. What they mean by that is that if they give the impression that they're putting people off the vaccine, they might get investigated by Ofcom just like this show is, because Ofcom makes anything at odds with the groupthink a risky proposition for a licensed broadcaster. Ethically speaking, you can't give informed consent to a medical procedure if all you know of that medical procedure is propaganda. Yet This Morning are scared lest they be perceived as not being on side with the propaganda. Eva Valadinga-Broek is with us, and she has watched a lot of the shifting COVID narrative in various jurisdictions around the Western world. Do you think something is changing with regard to this one-size-fits-all COVID regime?
Slowly but surely. I mean, the German Ministry of Health reported, I think a week and a half ago, that 1 in 5,000 shots cause serious side effects. Well, if that is true, and it's, you know, the German Ministry of Health putting that out, then can we speak of a safe vaccine? Apparently Ofcom doesn't want you to, but it's not you saying it, it's the German Ministry of Health, and that is a number that is unheard of with any other vaccine. So
no, and I like the way the standard on the internet, if you try to tweet about anything of this, then you get labeled by Twitter as misinformation on the grounds that the vaccine is safe for most people. Well, if aspirin was safe for most people, but it killed 49 out of 100 people, it'd be yanked from the market pretty quickly, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And there's the fact that Instagram and Twitter and all these social media platforms do that, and that they're trying to take people who spread the truth or say, hey, at least there is a dissenting opinion here within the scientific field, that they're taken off air, that they're taking off of social media. That shows you that there is something that they want to hide.
Yeah, do you think so? Because that's the reason. If it was just a normal public health conversation and a difference of opinion, would they be shutting down so many people, or do you think they're doing that for some more nefarious reason?
Well, it has never happened before. Could you think of any type of example 2 years ago where we would think it was normal that the government would put a banner under your post and say, follow for the state official narrative?
Yeah.
You know, that's not the type of stuff that you would think to see in free Western liberal democracies, would you now? But apparently we've all thrown all of those principles out of the window. And of course, there are huge interests at play here. Financially, the politicians who have pushed all of these policies that have made people's lives impossible, because this is not just, you know, a medical procedure. Your life was dependent on it, basically. If you were able to go to work, if you were able to go on public transport, if you were able to go and bring your kids to school, it's not nothing. And now if it turns out to be that this vaccine is, well, first of all, clearly not so effective, we should see Joe Biden and everyone else being vaccinated and still getting COVID, and it might also not be safe, then I think those people have a big problem.
I like the way you say free Western liberal democracies in that sarcastic term. It's funny, but it's actually tragic that it's become a term of mockery over the last 2 years. Ava's going to be back with us a little later, folks, to talk about some of the big picture stuff. We don't do a lot about the Tory leadership debates on this show, mainly because they don't talk about anything that matters. But the migrant issue is primal. It's not just about immigration. It has a knock-on effect on everything, cultural and economic. For example, distortions to the housing market caused by the accommodations needed for all these quote-unquote refugees seeking asylum from the war-torn hellhole that is Calais. As Polly just reported at the top of the hour, we now have a record. I think it was 600. The records keep going up. I can't keep track of them. I think it was 650 made the journey in a single day, ushered into England with the assistance of the Royal Navy, the laughably misnamed Border Force. Can Ofcom not get the Border Force, by the way, on truth in advertising grounds? I'd like to see that. And also a 2-century-old institution in Great Britain and Ireland that is apparently intent on utterly perverting its mission, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute. Joining us now is Kelvin Mackenzie, former editor of The Sun. Kelvin, will whoever becomes our next Prime Minister in September make any difference to what's happening in southern England?
Well, what is bizarre is in every policy that they've discussed, the one area that they never go into is the one which, if either of them could solve it, or anybody could solve it within the Tory party, they would win. They win by acclamation. They wouldn't have to have a vote. The truth about the matter is that I think Priti Patel has done her best. After all, she's Home Secretary. She wasn't the Prime Minister. She couldn't just push through any policy she fancied. But it's quite clear that Rwanda was an idea. Whether it turns out to be a too small idea, I don't know. And I get the impression that what Truss says is that she wants to widen the Rwandan operation, i.e. go to other countries. And I'm sure that if we wrote a big enough check to everybody, we could get some of them away. But it's going to take more than 200 a time. And it's going to take a massive push from within the cabinet. The country is with a decision which is going to solve this problem. We're talking about tens of thousands of people coming here. And of course, this is literally costing us billions now. It is literally billions per year. And not only that, bizarrely, we haven't now got enough hotel space or flat space. Why do you think the cost of accommodation in our country is going through the roof? Right, you're talking about your favourite media, The Guardian, right? Just look at what they're writing about, the cost of rents in the country. The cost of rents are going up 15, 20, 25% annually, bigger than normal inflation. Why is this happening? It's happening because we've got tens of thousands of people who have to be accommodated, and they cannot be accommodated in the present system. And yet nobody. Well, I mean, you're a media commentator, the same as everybody else. Tell me, have you ever heard Rishi say what we're going to do about this? Have you ever heard anybody say it? Since 2016, we are now coming up to our fourth Prime Minister, our fourth Conservative Prime Minister. By the way, I guarantee you that Truss gets beaten in 2 years' time, in which case we'll have a fifth Tory Prime Minister in 6 years. Right? Have you ever heard any of them say, this is the solution, this is what I'm going to put my shoulder to the wheel, I'm going to spend your money to solve this issue?
Well, why don't we let me put the obvious solution. Why don't we just pull out of the European Court of Human Rights? We're not part of the European Union. Why do we have to be part of a European legal framework in which an Azerbaijani judge or an Albanian judge, I'm just going through it from A to Z. I got nothing against Albanians or Azerbaijanis, but I'd like those Azerbaijani and Albanian judges to make laws for Albanians and Azerbaijanis, and I don't see why English common law should get trumped by an Azerbaijani jurist on the European Court. What's the political downside in pulling out of that?
There is no political downside. But as I think I've discussed with you once before, they basically are being held in the grip of our legal system because our Supreme Court have clearly said on the quiet to the Home Secretary, we will support you in your ambitions, but the minute you pull out of the European, quotes, quote unquotes, we are going to come after you and we are not going to give you a go-ahead to do anything else. It's as simple as that. The truth about the matter is our country is basically run by the Supreme Court. It is not run by the Cabinet. Now, of course, if you're a Labour voter, you probably think it's a bloody good idea, but I suspect that GBNews viewers will be upset. By the way, can I just say one other thing? I loved Lawrence Fox and your discussion with him. That was a most unusual discussion. First of all, Lawrence Fox doesn't get upset and excited like I do, and that was very relaxed. And at least two people, now the Chief Constable of Manchester and, of course, the Crime Commissioner for the area of where those police officers operated in, have both come out against it. So this isn't some kind of right-wing, nasty campaign. This is central policy. Something is going seriously wrong with the way that we police our country. I thought Lawrence Fox did himself a power of good.
Well, you say that as someone who's been very supportive of police and who's edited newspapers that have been supportive of police, Kelvin. England was the crucible of liberty at critical times throughout history, and to see it now criminalizing opinion is a tragedy. Thank you very much, Kelvin. It would be nice, don't you think, if one of these Tory leadership candidates who's going to be Prime Minister for a couple of months, starting in September, could find something to say about it in between their fascinating debates about how much more we should borrow from generations yet unborn, who won't be earning this money till late in the 22nd century. Stump the Steyn is looming, GB Views at gbnews.uk, and more from Ava Valardingerbroek, who's with us in the studio tonight. Don't touch that dial, we're coming right back.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory. twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
You know, sometimes important things seem to be happening, and other times our attention wanders. The Berlin Wall collapsed, and we all took a so-called holiday from history and focused on Bill Clinton's collapsing trousers for the best part of a decade. Meanwhile, some goatherds in Afghanistan were cooking up something ambitious, and they managed to get our attention again. And then we lost interest in that too. And then a town most of us had never heard of in China, but not Shanghai or any of those glittering coastal boutiques, a place called Wuhan managed to shut down the entire Western world except Sweden, and we've never really truly got back to normal. Eva Valadingerbroek is back with us, and it seems to me that something big is actually happening quite fast here, and that the COVID has provided the architecture for new organizing principles of our society.
Absolutely. I think it has made a lot of the system sort of be brought to light. So a lot of lies have been exposed about being that we are a post-historical society, that we are, like we joked about, a liberal Western democracy where everyone has human rights and we're all wealthy enough to have property and things function. And, you know, I feel like in the last 2 years, a lot of the things that used to be to most people a given, at least when it came to living in a democracy, having the rule of law, trusting the government, that has proven to be not as, well, true as maybe a lot of people thought it was. And you see that, I feel like, not just with COVID, but you can see it in basically every single aspect of life nowadays.
Yeah, and people think when you talk like this, oh, you must be some kind of conspiracy theorist. But in fact, the fellas on the other side, like wealthy and powerful and important people, are saying with perfectly straight faces that we're all going to be eating insects in the future. So if you just take what people are actually saying at face value, these people have got big plans for us.
Big plans, and I mean, it's basically every single aspect of your life that is dictated by the state. And COVID was obviously a perfect instrument to get into the civilians, the ordinary person's private life. Having a QR code on your phone that has to grant you access to society, the government tracking you everywhere you go, them deciding for you what, you know, type of vaccine you should take to be able to partake in society. Inflation having, well, we're beating record after record. People can't afford homes. My generation doesn't own anything. And that's also part of the agenda, because you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, according to the World Economic Forum. So it's almost like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And there are so many elements of life that I think if I speak to my grandfather, for example, he would have never thought that this is what would happen to the West.
Well, your grandfather's generation took it as read that you'd kind of get your first foot on the housing ladder when you were 22, 23, 24. Now people are like living in their parents' basement until early middle age. It seems to be clear that when we all switch over to electric cars by 2030 or whatever it is, that actually there's going to be small numbers of people still having private cars, and everybody else is going to be standing out in the pouring rain waiting for the number 37 bus. I mean, they seem to be saying, you're going to have a worse diet, you're not going to own property, and you're not going to have private car ownership that gives you mobility.
Right, but we will. That's also what they're saying. So not for you, but I'm going to be fine. You know, I'm going to be able to afford those plane tickets still. I'm going to drive my cars, my electric car, because I can afford it. But indeed, for the ordinary man, your life is going to look radically different, and it's going to be, if you don't do it, you're not a virtuous person. That's also, you know, what's all behind it, because then, you know, if you don't take the vaccine, you kill grandma. If you don't listen to the science, you're a bigot. Don't think for yourself. Just do what we say and buy what we offer.
The interesting thing is that about half the population in any Western society goes along with it. I mean, half in Canada, where those Canadian truckers appeared as heroic to some people, half the Canadian population think they're some kind of racist fascists, and the blackface mammy singer Justin was actually quite right to clamp down on them.
Right, because the machine works very well. I mean, the mainstream media has been preparing us for years that if you say something that dissents from what the government tells you, you can think, or if you dissent from the globalist narrative, that you are, well, I don't know what I've been called. I've been called an Aryan princess, a shield maiden of the far right, of whiteness. You can't imagine the things that they say to you.
What's that, a shield maiden of whiteness?
Whiteness, yeah.
That's your white privilege you're looking at right there, folks.
Yeah, and of course, the goal there is not to just crush me. The goal is to show people, don't agree with this woman or don't agree with Mark Steyn, because if you do that, then you're going against us and we can't have that. This is the fate that you'll face.
Well, nobody's ever called me an Aryan princess. I don't think I quite...
I've never been called a Somalian woman either. So
oh, no, I did that too. Do you think the Dutch farmers, as people in America who'd barely heard of the Netherlands, people, you know, who didn't know anything about this little country far away, and they're now all behind the Dutch farmers, what's the reaction actually like at home?
Well, if you were to believe the Dutch mainstream media, you'd think that there is no support for the farmers, because the media works incredibly hard now to have the Dutch people lose support for the farmers, because the support for the farmers was originally and still is high. It's the majority of the Dutch population, because this goes incredibly far. Our Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, has been in power, has now broken a record, longest ruling Prime Minister in the Netherlands, and he has ruined the country beyond recognition. Taking away people's private property for a nitrogen crisis, that little game of creating a crisis and taking your rights away, I feel like some people are kind of waking up to that.
That's good to know, because we could do with a lot of wake-up calls. You're going to be back with us tomorrow. We had a choice, you know, we take those 600 guys who arrived on the beach and train them all up at guest presenters, or just stick with Ava, and we're going to stick with Ava. Let's close it out with a bit of stumping. Aidan asks, is drag queen story time designed to teach the kids the tragedy of living with gender dysphoria, or is it just pushing trans ideology on young minds that don't have the ability to think critically? Look, these are 5- and 6-year-olds. What do they know about the tragedy of living with gender dysphoria? They're 5 and 6, and if you're going to tell them stories, they should be stories that expand their horizons and their imagination, not inflict on them the new state ideology. Jeff asks, who is your all-time favourite British Prime Minister? I think I've said this. I'm a big fan of the Marquis of Salisbury, who... had, apart from anything else, had magnificent facial shrubbery, if you look at any portrait of him. He was Prime Minister 120 years ago, and I would love it if some Marquis, it doesn't have to be the present Marquis of Salisbury, but compared to the present lot running for the Tory leadership, I'd like a Marquis to throw it. Where have all the Marquises gone? We deal with the important issues here, the lack of Marquises in the present Tory party. That's going to do it. Dan Wootton is here to macerate your Monday. What you got, Dan?
Mark Steyn, good evening to you. Cara Bell is here. She is the incredibly inspirational detransitioner, Mark, who campaigned against the Tavistock Clinic. So how does she feel now that it has been shut down for good? Why does the BBC broadcast hours and hours of the Commonwealth Games, or I guess I call them now the Common Woke Games, Mark, and then slag them off because, you know, they represent our terrible racist colonial history. So we're looking at that with Brendan O'Neill.
Yeah.
And I know you've done this on the show last week too, but Laura Dodsworth is looking into this whole trend of why we are being forced and nudged into eating bugs. I'm on them over this one, Mark.
Yep. OK. You're quite right about that Commonwealth Games. Oh, is it heartwarming? The Commonwealth Games, the family games, our great imperial What are you on about? It's all colonialist and race. Well, which way is it, BBC? You can't have it both ways. That is great stuff, Dan, and it's all coming up after the weather. Stay safe, stay free.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. There will be some wet weather around during the next 24 hours, although not necessarily in those areas that have been so dry recently, notably the south and southeast of England. It will also be warm across the UK. The weather coming in from the southwest, it's going to turn increasingly breezy, but also increasingly humid, with areas of cloud now thickening from the west. And we've already seen rain pushing into northern parts of the country, and that rain will continue overnight, heaviest over western hills, and a few dribs and drabs of light rain and drizzle reaching South Wales and the southwest, the Midlands as well. However, it's going to stay dry in the southeast, and it's a mild night for all, 17 or 18 Celsius on the thermometer first thing Tuesday. A lot of cloud, very gloomy across parts of Wales and the southwest, and Scotland as well as Northern Ireland first thing. But the skies brighten for Scotland and Northern Ireland by the afternoon. Some sunshine comes through. The heaviest of the rain moves through central areas as well. Staying damp across Wales and the southwest, but brighter skies for the southeast and humid here. 30 Celsius for London, 25 for eastern Scotland, and for all areas, a breeze coming in from the southwest, quite gusty around the northwest of Scotland, where there'll be showers continuing into Tuesday evening. A lot of cloud continues to affect the UK into the early hours of Wednesday, and as a result, it's a notably warm night in places central and eastern England, east Wales.